Jeremy Boring is out at the Daily Wire. So Jeremy Boring, I want to give everyone kind of some context for this. Is a big story, and probably a lot of you have heard about this by now. But basically, Jeremy Boring, who was one of the 3 founders of the Daily Wire, the other being obviously Ben Shapiro and Caleb Robinson, who was Jeremy's co-CEO up until Jeremy stepped down. Now he's apparently taking over as a full-time CEO. And I want to say right from the top, by the way, that this is still obviously very fresh. It's very new. Lots of things still being figured out. Lots of things coming out about the Daily Wire, about all of these things in general. But basically, the neat and skinny is that Jeremy Boring stepped down at the Daily Wire last week at the time of this recording. And this has been kind of played down by a lot of institutional and protectionist conservative media, including Ben Shapiro, by the way. And I don't even blame Ben for this, because Ben and Jeremy have been best friends for a very long time. They founded the company together. They have, they know each other's families. They've been involved in each other's lives very, very deeply for a long time. So Ben is trying to protect his friend, I think, and a lot of people are trying to protect Jeremy Boring, because the Daily Wire, and we'll get to this in a second, is probably, other than maybe like a Breitbart, maybe, or anybody else, it was the groundbreaking conservative independent media outlet in the world. It was very, very big that the Daily Wire got as big as they did that quickly, or not really that quickly, I should say, but that prominently, even back when the IDW was first forming. So what they're saying about Jeremy Boring right here, I'm going to pull this up. He is going to be a creative consultant inside of the company. That's what they're saying. So essentially, he is going to be overseeing the big projects. He's got something called the Pendragon Cycle coming on. We're going to talk about that in a second. He's still going to be hosting Daily Wire Backstage, which is their monthly YouTube show and subscriber show that has been a really big hit for a long time. They rented out the Ryman in Nashville for it a couple times. They've done a lot of really, really cool things there. And so he essentially is going to be the creative guru, genius, whatever inside of the company. But there's more to this story than they're letting on. I'm going to tell you that right now. I've heard a lot of things from a lot of people. I used to work with the Daily Wire. I have sources inside of the Daily Wire. Lots is going on. Lots is happening. And it is going to take a while for it to be shaken out. Megyn Kelly asked Ben Shapiro about this last week, or earlier this week or last week when Ben was on the show, about Jeremy. Ben essentially said the same thing. He's going to be a creative consultant. There's no fallout. People like Jeremy. Everything else. Things are still being shaken out. All of this is speculative, but we should dig into this more. It's very, very important for us to dig into this as we go through all of these things at this moment. So I think that what I really wanted to really make apparent from this is that the reason why we should dig into this more is because, the Daily Wire, no matter what you think of it, is a very, very important institution. It's very important because they have, for the longest time, been really... They were the first in the fray. And I think it's a very, very important institution. I think even a couple of years ago, I was watching one of Walsh's clips once, Matt Walsh, who I like, who's probably the only person that I like inside the Daily Wire anymore, to be honest, but I can get to that in a second. Walsh had said he was at a podcast, the Daily Wire got kicked out of, maybe it was like the Stitcher Awards or like a conference or something, but a podcasting conference. And essentially, Walsh did some math and the Daily Wire did some math to justify this. That the Daily Wire is essentially the 6th biggest media company in the world. And that includes everything from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Fox News, MSNBC, all these other type of things. They're a very, very large organization. It is one of the top media companies in the world, and it has been for a very, very long time. And as I said earlier, it was largely the first major conservative media company into the breach to fight against the institutional media class. There were very, very few people that were looking outside of even, Fox News and newspapers and talk radio to, get involved inside of this whole Daily Wire drama type nonsense. And I think that, from that perspective, there are things that we need to really pay attention to from this, because this is a bigger deal than people are letting this on. There's no way that it's not. There's no way that it's just something that's going to blow over time. And I think what makes it even more interesting, even though the Daily Wire is still a really, important institution, it's still a big media company. It's really kind of, again, it was, it's going to be, they were the first in the fray for a lot of these things. And I think really what has happened here and what I want to talk about from a values perspective, because that's what we do on the show. We talk about things from a value-driven worldview. What has happened here, I think, and the more I'm learning about this, the more that I think I'm right about this, is a very interesting study in leadership and what the perils of leadership should be. Because I wanted to take you guys back in time for a bit. So I've been a subscriber up until recently to the Daily Wire for a very long time. As I said, I worked with the Daily Wire on Jordan Peterson's team. I would not, and to be completely honest, if they asked me to do Ben's show, if they asked me to do Matt's show, I might have done Matt's show. That's probably the only thing I would do. But I signed up to work with Jordan Peterson, not with anybody else, not with the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire was a proxy for Jordan Peterson. We've talked about that too. Peterson is in a partnership with them. He's not an employee for them. He's a contractor for them, like all their personalities are, to be fair. If you are a top-performing, high-earning man in a corporate job, I have a free gift for you, the Value Economist Handbook. In this book, you'll find a bulletproof, crystal clear, and step-by-step roadmap to build your values, systematize them into an unbeatable portfolio, and leverage them to create an unshakable identity that leads to fulfillment, meaning, and purpose. So, if you want a free copy, go down to the description below, fill out your information, and we'll send one over to you right away. Now, let's get back to today's video. But even before all of this went down, so even look back to a couple of years ago, look around to like 2020 through 2023. Let's just go there. Because a couple of years ago, the Daily Wire was an unstoppable force. They were a supernova in terms of just the amount of amazing talent they had and the run that they were on, in terms of they had What Is a Woman come out. They signed Candace Owens. They signed Jordan Peterson. They signed Brett Cooper. They had Ben Shapiro. Walsh was a star. Michael Knowles and Andrew Klavan were both very, very stable pillars inside of the company. But now it seems like many things have happened. And at that time, there was a leak that came out, and actually a thing, the Daily Wire, I don't know if they were looking to sell, but they were looking to value the company. They had outside investors come in and value out the talent, the revenue stream. The Daily Wire has a large subscriber base. That's how they're able to fund all of their massive projects, fund their production, fund their shows, do all the things they were doing. They fought the government. They won in the OSHA case. The Daily Wire was a huge thing against the vaccine mandate case. And they were eventually valued at $1 billion. That's a big number for a media company, for an independent media company, $1 billion. When you think of it, the Daily Wire has a couple hundred employees. They have about now, I would say, 5 major personalities that are happening on. They have an independent journalist, like Megan Basham, who I love, works for there, wrote a great book on what's happening in evangelical Christianity called Shepherds for Sale. I'd highly recommend everyone go out and read Megan Basham's book. But anyway, the company was valued at $1 billion for a lean operation, for someone that only had really a couple of major assets in terms of their personalities and stuff. That was a big deal. That was a huge win, not only for the Daily Wire, but for the conservative media apparatus as a whole. But when you look at it now, when you look at the Daily Wire right now at this moment, especially after the whole Jeremy Boring blow up inside of the company, it seems to be completely hollow in value. Because when you look at the past year and a half especially, I really want to zero in. I think the moment where this all began to crack open was the Candace and Ben feud. So obviously, Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. And Candace, I think, has actually been very nice about this. I think Ben has been very nice about this post everything, but they had a massive blow up in the aftermath of October 7th, where a lot of the first Christ is King thing was going on, which was completely stupid and blown out of proportion. And, everyone was called an anti-Semite for proclaiming the name of Jesus in public, even though, like, there's nuance, I guess, to it, but it's stupid anyways. So Candace was forced out of the company. She got a gag order put on her. Even when she did a show on this when Jeremy first stepped aside as the CEO of the Daily Wire. And it seemed like Candace, for anyone who knows her, and I've been following Candace for quite a while, Candace is not afraid to just let it fly. But I think she is still under a gag order from the Daily Wire as of right now, because she could have said a lot more, but she didn't. She basically said this is going to be a wait-and-see thing. Brett Cooper was forced out of the company as well, and Brett was very close to Candace. Brett views Candace as a mentor and a friend and many other things. And so Brett Cooper was, I think, probably the biggest, maybe one of the biggest YouTubers in the world that were up and coming. I think she's only 23 years old as of right now. She met her husband at the Daily Wire, and she had a massive show with the comment section on YouTube. I don't know what kind of deal they did, or she just joined the Daily Wire as a contractor, or the Daily Wire bought her IP or whatever. Actually, they did buy her IP, because Brett Cooper was getting, I think she was by far the rising star of the company, by far. Shapiro had kind of leveled out. Walsh was still kind of climbing in I would say reverence and influence inside of the conservative media sphere, but Brett Cooper was their star. She was their star player. She was the star pitcher, the third baseman that they had farmed out in the league and in the minors, and then they were going up, and she had just broken into the majors, and she was crushing it. She was hitting a 300 batting average. She was averaging 28 points a game, 3 touchdowns a game. She was a rock star for the Daily Wire. And then she got forced out. And Jeremy put out a video after Brett got forced out by saying, again, there's no beef, there's no bad blood, there's no anything, but we're going to take Brett Cooper out of the show that she founded and she bootstrapped, and we're going to put her, I believe, her maid of honor and her best friend in the seat that Brett kind of had for a while. They still have the rights to the comment section, so Brett did sign that over, unfortunately, because that was a really good brand for her, and that was her original brand. And it's bombed ever since. Like, they hate, the Daily Wire people have revolted against this new comment section host. I don't even remember what her name is, but she's not Brett Cooper. I'll just put it that way. She is not Brett Cooper. And the revamp of it was just completely shut down, panned. They hate it. The views have dropped. Every one of the Daily Wires is down. Walsh is down. Shapiro's down. Klavan's down. Knowles is down. Everybody is down inside of the Daily Wire. And if it weren't for Walsh doing the smash hit of I Am a Racist with a follow-up to What is a Woman, which I have not seen, to be fair, but I've heard it's hilarious from everyone who has seen it. Rogan had Walsh on and he talked about it, and Walsh has been on a bunch of different things to do it, and Walsh is great. But essentially, you take out the success of Am I Racist by Matt Walsh. You look at, they had a comedy movie they tried to do called Lady Ballers. That bombed. And then what I really want to get to now in relation to Jeremy Boring is what is being called the Pendragon cycle. So for all of those who do not know about this thing and project that the Daily Wire is doing right now, so the Pendragon cycle is essentially a King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table remake. And it's kind of the original script in the Daily Wire right after the Disney fiasco when they launched their kids platform, which also isn't doing really good. Apparently, having a family of conservative chinchillas is not landing with people who want to watch Disney Plus, just putting that out there. But they bought the rights to the Pendragon cycle, and they were going to adopt this inside of their own sphere. And this has gone, I think, completely botched as far as I'm concerned. It is being reported that the Pendragon cycle, with the Daily Wire running it, is the most expensive independent media project ever, and it's over a year late. And now with Jeremy running this company and now blowing this up and losing all of their revenue and being, and now also I want to say this too, is that they've had all of these things happen and their subscriber base is kind of stalled out from what I've heard inside of the company. And the public perception of the Daily Wire has just completely gone into the toilet in the past year and a half, particularly since the Ben and Candace beef kind of went out, and now Candace has been vindicated and everyone who has left the Daily Wire has been more successful than at the Daily Wire. Candace has over 4 million subscribers on YouTube in less than a year that has gone to her show, raking in money from YouTube, raking in money for her investigative journalism pieces. Brett Cooper is just bang right out of the gate. She's doing all this stuff that, she's going to be on Sean Ryan's show soon. That's going to be an interesting interview. But she has gone with her new show and she's just crushing it right there. Everything that has left the Daily Wire has gotten better since the Daily Wire has let them go. And I think that's very, very interesting because a lot of people thought that the opposite would happen. And so the Daily Wire right now, there's reports out there, again, none of this confirmed. They're looking to sell the company. They're looking to get an outside investor to come in and pump cash inside of the company because the revenue is kind of going up, belly up. There's been a lot of things that Jeremy stepped down because a lot of people have been mad at Jeremy Boring. Apparently people don't like Jeremy Boring all that much. He's kind of been viewed as a tyrant, viewed as kind of, just very much... just not a good leader inside of the company. There's a lot of people that really don't care for Jeremy Boring. And this leads me into the final thing. What I want to talk about really at the end of this is that I think the real question we need to ask is the following. With the whole Daily Wire seemingly crumbling in front of our eyes, who is to blame for this? Because again, the Daily Wire 2 to 3 years ago was the hottest thing in independent media. Like, they could not lose. Everything, hit after hit after hit, banger after banger after banger. It was like, this was like Travis Scott's first 3 albums. This was like Kendrick Lamar's, all of his project, boom, 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 boom. Kanye West before he kind of went crazy. All like hit after hit after hit after hit every single time. And yet they've fallen completely off the wagon. It seems like they're bailing out water out of the boat, trying to make sure that they're staying afloat. And what I want to point to now is the great Jason Whitlock, who I love. I'm going to be seeing Jason again in about a month at Roll Call 3.0 in Nashville. If you guys, men out there particularly, if you guys do not know what Roll Call is, Jason's conference out in Nashville, Tucker Carlson is going to be headlining along with Jason. Anthony Walker, who I love, is going to be there. Doug Wilson is going to be there. Lots of great people inside of this. But I want to talk about Jason because I think Jason is probably the most important cultural commentator in America. I think Jason is unbelievably smart. I think I've thought that, by the way, when he was back as a sports reporter primarily, I've always thought Jason's commentary was super sharp. He's not afraid to say what he says. But he got into this Twitter spat a couple of days before this happened with Jeremy Boring. And so Jason goes on to X And he comments on this petition that Ben Shapiro tweets out. And because Ben tweeted out a pardon petition for Derek Chauvin, the person involved with the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And Ben and the Daily Wire, along with many people, probably myself included, I'd have to examine it more, believes that Chauvin was kind of gypped by the law enforcement people that convicted him, and believes he should be pardoned and sent back to state prison and not federal prison or whatever the case may be. I've heard a lot of reports on this. And the goal of this petition by Ben Shapiro was to get President Trump to pardon Derek Chauvin with a presidential pardon. And Jason thought this was ill-advised, as did many people in conservative media, by the way. Jason was just the person, he quoted Ben's tweet and said, I think this is going to derail the Trump agenda. It's going to get him unnecessary media scrutiny. He's on a roll right now. Don't let him out, whatever. So he kind of just, again, very innocently kind of just critiques this and says he doesn't take a shot at Ben. He just says this is ill-advised. I think that was the word that he used. And Jeremy Boring quotes this tweet and says back to Jason, something akin to, I think, if Ben Shapiro cured cancer, Jason Whitlock would have something to bitch about. And Jason was like, whoa, that's kind of wild. And then Jeremy goes on this paragraph long diatribe on X. You can look this up. This is wild stuff. And about just these, he seems like an insane person. He seems like a leftist. And so he's kind of just going on these rants, and then the Christ is King thing kind of does. And he's like, I've never seen this much anti-Semitism in my life, like everything else. And so he's out there. He's a very public CEO. He's trying to make it seem like he's this creative savant. He's going to lead this new revolution in media, and he's going to be this kingmaker in Hollywood. And I found Brett Cooper, and I found Candace Owens, and I found Ben Shapiro. And so this is important because we need to understand where Jeremy Boring came from. Because Jeremy Boring was born in Texas, but he tried for a long time to make it in Hollywood, and he wasn't able to do so. He wasn't able to make it. He tried to make it as an actor, flopped. Writer, flopped. Director, flopped. And then he met Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro was a superstar when Jeremy met him. He already had a syndicated column, I believe, at 17 years old. He was on radio. He was already at Breitbart. And he found and networked with Ben, and they became friends. And he latched onto Ben and partnered with him to start the Daily Wire, a political news company. But what Jeremy wanted to do, and he's been very open about talking this, he wanted the Daily Wire to turn into a film company. He tried to make it into a film studio. And I think he flew too close to the sun. And he tanked the Daily Wire's finances, he tanked their reputation, and he tanked his own reputation by taking the Daily Wire out of the lane of political conservative media, which they were dominating at the time of the early 2020s. And then he tries to make Snow White with Brett Cooper in it, by the way. That bombs. Lady Ballers bombs. The Pendragon cycle is going to bomb. The Daily Wire's reputation is in the toilet. Everyone thinks that they're kind of a part of this woke light movement, which we'll get into in a second. But I think they just extremely fumbled the bag. And the harsh reality of it is this. Jeremy Boring, like a lot of quote-unquote conservatives in media out there, this can make a lot of people upset. Jeremy Boring is a leftist. Jeremy Boring is a closeted leftist. Jason Whitlock was the first person to say, let's give him credit again. Jeremy Boring is a leftist. He behaves just as woke as all of the woke crowd, even complete with the glasses. He wears a cardigan. He wears a key on the sort of his thing because he's like a drama geek, whatever. And he has the gray hairdo. He looks like a Karen. So Jeremy Boring he's not a conservative. He's a lot of things, but he's not a conservative. He is a scorned Hollywood elitist. Like so many of the people that hate Americans, that hate the people that they serve, who hate watch their movies, everything else. And I think it all comes back to this. This is the whole thing the point I want to make about Jeremy Boring is the following. The chief sin of the woke crowd and the increasing woke light movement that we're seeing on the right, I predicted this, by the way, is pride. The left has dedicated a whole month to pride. Jeremy Boring, if you guys did not know, called himself the God King, the lowercase God King of the Daily Wire. But Jeremy Boring is a quote-unquote devout Christian. But it can't get more prideful, and you can't get more prideful than comparing yourself to the one true God. And he got slapped for it, especially in the whole Christ is King thing. Because I think that's when Jeremy got truly revealed. Jeremy Boring is a Christian. He's a conservative. But people can't proclaim the name of Jesus. That people who saying, Christ is King, they don't hate Jews. They're not anti-Semitic. A lot of them are probably fans of Ben Shapiro. and Dennis Prager and all the other Jews that are out there in conservative media. There are a lot of them, and I like most of them. I'm sure there's some I disagree with on some, like Israel or whatever. But, he got slapped down for it, and they made a mockery of Christianity, of his values that come from Christianity as a result of this. He did not stick to his values, or so that he claims. Jeremy Boring is a fraud. He's a counterfeit. And I've thought that for a while, and I think he just exposed it as such.